Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for your patience. I just want to wait a minute while folks come in from the waiting room. Okay, well, I'm going to get started then. Welcome and thank you for being with us tonight, Thursday, September 22nd, for the Berkeley Rent Stabilization Board Candidate Forum. My name is Adina Ishii of the League of Women Voters of Berkeley, Albany, Emeryville. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization that encourages informed and active participation in government. We do not support or oppose parties or candidates. The advocacy arm of the League may take positions on issues such as ballot measures. However, this forum is presented by the Voter Services and Education arm of the League, which does not support or endorse candidates. I'd like to remind everyone that the candidates have all agreed to participate under ground rules set for this forum. You can see the rules on our website on the candidate forum page. One of our volunteers will put the link in the chat. Berkeley Community Media is live streaming tonight's forum on Comcast Channel 28 and AT&T Channel 99. We are recording this forum and the video will be available on our website, lwvvae.org, on our YouTube channel and through votersedge.org/CA, with links on our social media accounts at lwvvae. Berkeley Community Media will rebroadcast this forum tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. on Comcast Channel 28 at 12 p.m. and 8 p.m. on Comcast Channel 33. There are 8 candidates running for Berkeley Rent Stabilization Board commissioners. They are Solly Albert, Stefan Elgstrand, Wendy Syens Hood, Carol Marasevich, Vanessa Danielle Marrero, Ida Martinac, Nathan Mizell, and Nagin Mosaid. You can vote for 5 candidates. Rent board commissioners are decided through a plurality vote. With a plurality vote, the candidates who receive the highest number of votes will be declared the winners. Now let's go over a few rules for this forum. Each candidate has 2 minutes for opening remarks. The order was determined by drawing lots. The timekeeper will signal candidates with a green colored window, which will count down the seconds from 2 minutes to 15 seconds to go, when it will turn yellow, and then red when the full 2 minutes is up. Attendees had an opportunity to submit written questions through our website or when they registered for the forum via Zoom. If you have additional questions, you may submit them by clicking the Q&A icon and typing your questions. Our volunteers will take the questions and pass them to me. All questions will be screened to avoid duplication and personal attacks. The order of answering the questions will be alternated, and each candidate will have 1 minute to respond to each question. Again, the timekeeper will signal candidates. There will be no separate rebuttals. However, the candidates may choose to use some or all of their 1 minute to rebut the responses given by another candidate. Following the questions, each candidate shall have 1 minute for a closing statement. Now, let's begin with our first candidate who will be sharing their opening statement, and that is Nathan. Go ahead, Nathan.
Thank you again for the introduction, and I thank you to the League of Women Voters for holding this very important event. My name is Nathan Mizell. I use he, him pronouns. I am a recent Cal graduated this past May. And I am someone who, throughout my time in the city of Berkeley, has been passionate about making a difference. For me, that's taking the form of service on the Police Review Commission, the Police Accountability Board, and ensuring the city's Reimagining Public Safety Task Force to really look at solutions to shift our public safety paradigm and move towards restorative and empirically sound practices that can really help our community thrive. What I've learned through that work and also my time as a student leader on campus was, if we're really going to make a difference in our community, we have to have a community. And I think fundamentally that starts with the work of the board, the importance of the rent board ordinance and the just cause ordinance. I wouldn't be a Berkeley resident still if not for rent control. And I know firsthand as a student and as someone who's navigated the housing crisis and seen my friends deal with the crisis, how serious it is and how much our policy must reflect this seriousness. I believe, the policies that we create in terms of housing have to truly latch on to that promise of housing being a human right. It can't simply be a talking point. It has to be something that is true in each policy decision we make. And that's something I am dedicated towards doing on the rent board. I would say really in closing, or as we're opening here to close this statement, that the work of the board is fundamentally about tenants. Yes, it is, of course, works for landlords and mom and pop landlords as well, but it must have a function of serving tenants, ensuring that we can have a robust community that allows folks to come and move in and stay at affordable prices, but ensures our community that exists here remains and can thrive as well. So I think those are fundamental, and I thank you for the time.
Thank you, Nathan. Negin?
Hi, thank you for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here with you tonight. My name is Negin Mosaid, and I started my journey here in Berkeley 12 years ago when I came here as a single mom, raising my 2 kids. And I realized quickly that a lot of their classmates and family members were being displaced and moved out of the area. And so a lot of friends they made would slowly go away. And that was very troubling. But I also started working in a clinic as a physical therapist. That's my profession. And I realized that a lot of my patients had the same story. A lot of the underlying causes of their physical pain was due to housing insecurity. And as I tried to become an advocate for them and see how I could help these patients so that I could get them better physically by securing their housing, I found out about the rent board. I referred a lot of people to the rent board, and I realized how it works. And they were able to help a lot of my tenants that were being displaced without just cause. And so I also became very involved with my community in Berkeley. I'm a community activist. I belong to Friends of Adeline in South Berkeley, a community group that is hoping to help with the right of return, securing the BART area for affordable housing for more of community members and maintaining that community. I'm a member of Berkeley Citizens Action for the past 4 or 5 years, been very active there on a monthly basis. And also now I'm very involved with Berkeley Tenants Union, which brings me to why I'm so proud to be elected on this slate of 5 people by the community to ensure that we maintain stable housing by just cause protection for evictions, and also that we expand rent control and maintain all the rent controlled units. As we have realized in the past 4 years, even with this administration and council, we have lost many rent control units, and this is crippling to our community. I have taken vows to support and protect the laws for rent control, and I'm here as an okay. Sorry.
Thank you. Ida?
Hi, good evening. My name is Ida Martinac, and I thank you very much for inviting me. I regard the League of Women Voters as a very important organization. I'm also an election integrity activist, so your role is near and dear to my heart. I'm a first-generation immigrant from what used to be Yugoslavia is Croatia now. I have, since I moved to the Bay Area from New York City in 2003, I have moved 11 times. And my 13-year-old middle schooler has already moved 8 times with me. I'm a single mom and trying to stay in the vicinity of her dad and struggling with the high costs of rent. It's been very difficult to build community. So I'm interested in, I'm running for the rent board because I would like to foster a sense of community such as existed in the old country, where people can thrive and age in place and raise their children in a stable environment without fearing constant moving. I'm also passionate about sustainability and climate resilience for Berkeley tenants. I would like to find ways to make that happen. Something like inspiring landlords to install solar panels, or many other ways of making our lives easier and less dependent on the vagaries of international affairs. Thank you very much for your time. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, Stefan.
Well, good evening, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this event and everything that you do. My name is Stefan Elkstrand. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm running for the Berkeley Rent Stabilization Board to bring progressive principled leadership. Now, during this housing crisis, it is critical that we have a rent board, rent board commissioners with experience. And I have a proven record of working closely with tenants, small property owners, and affordable housing advocates to make Berkeley more affordable and accessible. As a senior legislative aide to Berkeley Mayor Jesse Arreguín, I have been involved in basically every major tenant policy in recent years, including the landmark Tenant Protection Ordinance. After the tragic balcony collapse in 2015, I worked on the Rental Housing Safety Program to prevent such tragedies from happening again. More recently, I have worked on the COVID-19 Emergency Response Ordinance to bring stability and protections to countless people. I've also worked on the city budget to introduce proposals that have secured millions of dollars in rental assistance. Leaders recognize my experience and ability to bring consensus without compromising values. That is why I have the endorsement of a supermajority of the Berkeley City Council, a majority of the school board, the Alameda County Democratic Party, the Berkeley Democratic Club, and many more. It's not just elected officials who support me. I have built a broad coalition of tenants, small landlords, and community members who recognize the need to have experienced and trusted leadership on the rent board. I am committed to improving the livelihoods of our community through cooperation, not division, and will be held accountable to the people of Berkeley. I hope I can count on your support. For more information, you can visit my website, stefan.vote. That's STEFAN.vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. Carol? Carol, are you here? You're on mute. Okay, Carol, I'm going to go to the next person and we'll pop back over to you as soon as you're able to unmute. Wendy, you're next.
I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum. My name is Wendy Science Hood, and I'm running as an independent candidate for the Berkeley Rent Board because I'm concerned that the current rent board policy of actively pursuing increased control over ADUs, golden duplexes, and in-law suites will lead to less affordable housing on the market. Existing housing is the most affordable housing, period. So I believe that the rent board should do more to encourage homeowners and small housing providers to increase our supply of housing. I'm the daughter of an Ecuadorian immigrant that came to this country with $25. I'm a former Berkeley homeowner. Currently, I'm a tenant living with my 101-year-old landlady. My tenancy allows her to age in place and retain much of her independence. If families believe that they will lose the right to determine how their space is used, I believe we will lose a lot of housing to vacation and short-term rentals. I wholeheartedly believe that balanced rent board policy is sustainable policy. My own tenancy is dependent on having people open their homes. And I think current community members that have space should be encouraged to rent and enticed to rent. And I would like to see more encouragement from the rent board to make more housing available, because we can build housing, but that's going to take time. And we need housing and more of it and more affordable housing now. Thank you.
Thank you. Carol, are you here now? Carol, are you able to take yourself off mute? Okay, we're gonna move on to the next person, but we'll try to come back again. Solly, you're next.
Well, good evening, and thank you all for putting on this forum. This is a great service you perform for all of the public every election. My name is Solly Alpert. I'm currently the vice chair of the Berkeley Rent Board, the only incumbent up for re-election this year. And I serve as a legislative assistant for Berkeley Councilmember Rigel Robinson, previously for Councilmember Kate Harrison. I'm also a union activist and a steward with SEIU 10-1. And I am the oh God, what's my title? The administrative coordinator for the Williston Democratic Renewal Club, among a few other hats. And I'm really happy and proud to be running on a slate nominated by the Berkeley Tenant Convention. And that's myself, Nathan Mizell, Vanessa Marrero, Ida Martinac, and Negin Mosaed. And we were nominated by a convention, the Tenant Convention, which is a result of a process co-sponsored by organizations including the Berkeley Tenants Union, the Williston Democratic Renewal Club, SEIU 10-1, Friends of Adeline, the neighborhood organization in South Berkeley, fighting against gentrification and displacement, and many other community organizations, including those representing seniors and the disabled. And the Tenant Convention and our candidacy and our slate stands for a really simple prospect, which is that tenants deserve to have a say in their own future. And that one of the most fundamental challenges that face tenants in our community is that the place that we live, the place we raise our families, the place where we're sending our kids to school from, where we're commuting to work from, the place where we're making so much of our lives, our homes, we don't have control over the future of those spaces, that someone else does. And sometimes it's a well-meaning mom and pop landlord, and sometimes it's a giant conglomerate like BlackRock. But that tenants in any of these situations deserve to have a say in their futures, that they are part of the community, they are not other than our community simply because they do not own property. And the convention and the board stands for that prospect that we need to ensure that tenants can stay in their homes, that they deserve to have stable rents. They deserve not to be evicted for no reason. And so I think that I appreciate being here today, and I'm looking forward to telling you all about us and our slate. You can learn more at berkeleyrentboard.org.
Thank you. Vanessa, I would like you to go next. We're gonna try to figure out how to unmute Carol. I think she's having some technical difficulties, but Vanessa, why don't you go next and we will try to, oh, Carol, are you there? Carol, can you say something? It looks like you're unmuted. Okay. We're gonna try again. Sorry, continue, Vanessa.
No problem. Good evening, everybody. Feliz Orencia de Mes Latina. Good, happy Hispanic Heritage Month. My name is Vanessa Marrero, and I'm a Latina public school advocate, as well as a nonprofit leader. I'm a tenant in Berkeley since 2004, and I'm a parent of 3 beautiful children, one with a disability and one who is transgendered. And I'm very passionate about the next chapter of what the Berkeley Rent Stabilization Board will look like, to be able to ensure that we have community voice and engagement that focuses on an economically integrated, just society. I have a lot of experience in public education, as well as nonprofit leadership stemming at least 2 decades. And yes, I do believe housing is a human right. With inflation at an all-time high, many of our longtime renters, like myself, earn just enough to scrape by and need strong rental protections to prevent them from being displaced from Berkeley. And on the, as you know, the Rent Stabilization and Eviction for Good Clause Ordinance is a key to fostering equity-centered policies and practices for our families, for our young people, for our individuals with disabilities, for our elderly, and for LGBTQIA+ communities. And I am steadfast in making sure that there are 3 key focus areas. One is that there's opportunity housing. This is a focus on an economically integrated community. Berkeley is a place for all people. Right. The second is that we have safety and accessibility for all populations, especially those who are disabled and aged. And the next is that we have a set of regulations that are going to be intentional and specific around executing outcomes. I appreciate being here, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Vanessa. It seems that Carol is still having issues with her audio. We will continue on the back end to try to get her the ability to speak. I'm very sorry about that, everyone. But I think that we will need to move on to our first question. And so for our first question tonight, What can be done to protect renters as we recover from the COVID-19 pandemic while also being fair to property owners of modest means? And that question will begin with Negin. Negin, are you here? Uh-oh. Okay. Let's move on to Ida, and we'll have to come back again. Ida, do you need me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So the first question is, what can be done to protect renters as we recover from the COVID-19 pandemic while also being fair to property owners of modest means?
Well, I guess the simple answer is to distribute state rent funds, which do exist.
Okay. Next would be Stefan.
Well, during the last couple of years, I've worked very closely in the mayor's office on addressing this very issue, working on the COVID-19 emergency response ordinance, which has brought stability and helped prevent countless people from facing evictions. And we've made sure that they are able to get the funds needed to pay the rent, because it's not just one way. We need to make sure that tenants are able to be able to pay the rent, and that small landlords are able to pay the mortgage as well. And that's what I'm committed to continue doing, because we know that one way or another, the eviction moratorium that is tied to the local state of emergency will come to an end as we shift from a pandemic to an endemic. So we need to make sure that we have the resources in place to prevent an eviction cliff from happening. And that's what I'm committed to doing, to continue making sure that we get this funding from many sources, state, local, regional, federal, to make sure that we can keep people in their homes.
Thank you so much. Negin, would you like to respond to the question?
Yes, actually, this is a question that I have directly been involved in as a tenant for I own the community physical therapy unit that the community physical therapy clinic. I was a tenant during this pandemic, and we did not have rent protection because we were renting a commercial space. And the result was that I literally almost lost the practice, and it was only through the help of the community that I was able to relocate and get the funds to pay back my old landlords, who were gouging and increasing the rent as time was going on during the pandemic, and pay my new rent. So the reality is, once we hit that cliff where people are forced to pay back rent and pay present rent, there will be a calamity. And we need to be there to protect the tenants. As we've had the moratorium during this time, anyone who has applied for state funding should be protected so that they are not, if they're waiting for the state funds to kick in, they are not kicked out. And we should use further state funds to protect and pay back their old rents.
Negin, thank you. Carol, I seem to be able to hear Carol. Carol, are you there?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Oh my God, it's a miracle.
You want me to let me repeat that question, and I'm going to allow you to respond.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. What can be done to protect renters as we recover from the COVID-19 pandemic while also being fair to property owners of modest means?
I'm not sure if you're hearing me on the phone or on the computer. So I will speak by phone. So as we come out of COVID, if I understand the question is, how will we protect renters? On the homeless services panel of experts where I am chair, we recommended an additional $1 million for the housing retention monies, because we do need to continue to follow up, and as we approach the end of the eviction moratorium. The other issue is that even though some tenants are not covered under rent control because of Costa-Hawkins, They are entitled to other protections under state and federal laws and under city ordinances, such as the Tenants Protection Ordinance. So we need to continue to fund legal services such as the East Bay Community Law Center and the Eviction Defense Center to continue to support them and advise them of their rights. Thank you.
Wendy?
Yes, thank you. I think the rent board has to play a critical role in being a resource to guide both tenants and owners in managing what comes next. The board has little power as they aren't a legislative body that controls the eviction moratorium legislation, but they can absolutely advocate to the council what they believe should happen next. And I think that they play a critical role in being a bridge to both tenants and landlords or small property owners of limited means. And absolutely, they have to be an advocate for both.
Thank you, Wendy. Solly?
This is a great question, and it's one of the most important issues that we're going to be dealing with going into the next few years at the board. I'm very worried about the eviction moratorium and the eviction cliff and eviction crisis that could create. And one of the ways that we tried to prepare ourselves was by addressing so-called golden duplexes, which are units in the city of Berkeley that, because of local law, have no eviction protections whatsoever. And everyone on our slate was proud to stand, behind the rent board proposal that would have brought those eviction protections, if it had been put on the ballot and adopted, provided those eviction protections to tenants immediately. In contrast, our opponents, two of them opposed putting that measure on the ballot and protecting tenants, and a third advocated in favor of watering down those protections such that for most tenants, those protections would not have been realized for many, many years, making it not practical as a solution for the coming eviction crisis we face with the end of the eviction moratorium. So really, it is a crisis. We need to do everything we can to address it. Very disappointed that measure did not get placed on the ballot, and we need to do more to make sure that tenants are protected.
Thank you, Solly. Next is Vanessa.
Thank you. I think this is like coming to the core of what the role of a commissioner is. So I'll talk about what I'm going to do. I'm a new and fresh, action-oriented, effective public servant. I'll be collaborative and transparent, but really focused on fiduciary board governance. That's going to look at, again, economically integrated neighborhoods. I think as we look at the regulations, the ordinances, it is really important for us to think about how we're going to delineate and execute implementation, right? And so in this next stage, what I'm excited about is to be able to provide one community voice to those who may not have the voice up until the slate got involved, as well as to be able to make sure that there is, again, safety and accessibility when we look across both landlords and tenants. And so I'm excited that the rent stabilization program does serve both, and there's a number of services that either party can engage with. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Nathan?
Yes, thank you. And I'll very much echo the comments of my slate members. I think the real world solutions, requires us to look towards increasing rent control and protection of tenants. I think we saw that proposal come up to city council and unfortunately not pass, but we worked in full support. And as a person who's been a commissioner on the Fishery Commission, Police Accountability Board, I understand very well advocating for policies when you don't have the explicit power to make them happen. I understand the work that takes. I understand it's not easy. I understand there are arguments, disagreements that will come up. What I can fully commit to is that when we are facing obviously such a serious eviction cliff potentially, that this is a policy and practices that protect tenants in these cases will be first and foremost on my agenda in every conversation I have with legislators. It's not something that any of us could say, we can put this off for a week or month. It is an immediate issue and one that will be first on my agenda if I'm fortunate enough to serve on the board.
Thank you, Nathan. This next question will begin with Ida. What will you do to make rent more affordable in Berkeley?
The $16 million question. For one, all of our slate is a strong supporter. We're all strong supporters of the vacancy tax measure M, whereby some of the empty units, of which there are many, would be opened up for renters, and funds for those who refuse to rent. The tax would provide funds for affordable housing. So it's a win-win. It's a wonderful measure, and that's one of the ways in which rent could be lowered. We would like to also expand rent control, thereby lowering rent to buildings, because right now there's the Costa Hawkins is limiting. Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Edith. Stefan?
Well, I'm a strong believer of the 3 Ps of housing. We need to protect tenants, preserve existing affordable housing, and produce more housing. And there's many ways to do this. And on this election, there's 3 ballot measures that will help achieve this goal. Measure L will provide $200 million in affordable housing. I am proud to have worked on the Measure O campaign, which has created 800 units of affordable housing, and we can continue to make more. I also support Measure M, which has been mentioned, the vacancy tax, to bring units that have been taken off the market back on the market. And I obviously support Measure N as well to increase our ability to create more affordable housing. So these, as well as making sure that we continue reforms on a statewide level to be able to expand protections, is very critical. But we need to do all 3: protect, preserve, produce.
Thank you, Stefan. Carol?
I also vigorously support Measure M. And in fact, a year and a half before this was proposed at council, I proposed a vacancy tax through the Homeless Commission when I was serving as chair. I also have proposed through the Homeless Commission that the city engage in a nexus study to review the below market rate units so that there are more units on site as opposed to paying into the Affordable Housing Mitigation Fund. I have also proposed on the Homeless Commission a recommendation that went to council about incorporating extremely low income persons into the Adeline Corridor Plan. I have worked on homeless prevention and expanding subsidies, and persons with subsidies not being discriminated against through by proposing the enforcement of the source of income discrimination ordinance.
Carol, thank you. Wendy?
Yes. Well, I firmly believe that, as a commissioner, we have to uphold the rent control law. I mean, that's the first thing. But as I've been saying all along, the most affordable, and I would love to build lots more affordable housing, but as a commissioner, I wouldn't have that power to build. But I do think the most affordable housing is housing that already exists. And as a rent board commissioner, I want to encourage and support members of our community who have the space to bring their spaces forward. I think that we have to show that we are supportive of small property owners and that we are there for them, and that we are a partner with them to help bring more housing onto the market, including Section 8. We need to be for that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Solly?
Could you restate the question? I want to make sure I got it.
Yes, of course. Yeah, I will actually, I should do that after every 4. What will you do to make rent more affordable in Berkeley?
That's a great question. I think that is the fundamental question. I'll just start off. I appreciate everyone who's mentioned supporting Measure M. I'm proud to have helped draft Measure M alongside Councilmember Kate Harrison. And our slate is canvassing not just for ourselves, but also for Measure M, the vacancy tax, to make sure that we can both bring units back on the market that are being held off the market and raise money for affordable housing. How do we, create affordability in our community? I think the answer is that we build affordable housing. Fundamentally, we know, that there is a place and a utility to the new market rate development, but that it is only really going to benefit the top end of the spectrum, and that, developers aren't necessarily evil, but they certainly don't have the best interest of our community at heart. And that as a board, we need to make sure we're advocating for anti-displacement and anti-speculation measures so that new development is serving our community, and inclusionary requirements, land value recap, and other provisions to make sure that we are getting the resources we need to really provide affordable housing, social housing, cooperative housing, low income housing, supportive housing for our community.
Thank you. Vanessa?
Thank you. I think in order to increase housing stability and affordability for our tenants, the rent stabilization is the effective and most resourceful tool. I think by setting predictable limits around maximum rent increases per year, it protects tenants from excessive rent increases while ensures that landlords can have some level of fair return. I think that we need to definitely make sure that we have halts around rent gouging and stabilizing prices, reducing displacement. Vulnerable populations, especially those that are at risk of homelessness, and increasing housing security and affordability for the long run. I think tenants really benefit from rent stabilization. I'd like to see this expanded, but also codified to be able to specifically serve individuals with disabilities, the aged, and other vulnerable populations. Thank you.
Thank you. Nathan?
Thank you. Yeah, I think, again, as Sully said, this is really a fundamental question. And I think the answers are simple, but obviously a lot of work to get done. I think first is the clear repeal of Costa-Hawkins. Its effects, especially I can tell you as a student, are extreme. The raising of rents after one sale moves out, another one moves in. The effects of that are profound. So that's number one. I think number two is supporting other legislation that can increase tenant power to hold on to housing and keep it at an affordable rate. I think we've seen that, I and obviously Slate supports the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, or TOPA, in the city of Berkeley. We need to push to get that legislation move forward. I think it's common sense and enables tenants to have better control and hopefully future control of where they live, and to keep it as permanently affordable housing or perhaps a form of social housing. So I think those are the two big points that, if we can move towards implementing, can lower rents and at minimum keep rents where they are and keep rents affordable.
Thank you, Nathan. Nagin?
Thank you for that question. I've pondered this question many a nights and laid awake worried for all of my community. And what I believe as a Berkeley Tenant Union member and a person who has been elected by this convention is that we need to organize tenants to a worldwide, nationwide movement, a city movement at most. We have at least 57% of Berkeley residents being tenants, and we have to strive for rent control by repealing Costa-Hawkins. We can't do that without a consistent, organized movement towards reaching that goal. These legislations are important. Measure M, if we can get TOPA passed, but we need organization to get all this done. The rent board is an important unit that we need to get the whole convention on, because we are elected by an organized unit of people in Berkeley who are demanding certain things, and we have vowed to get them done. And that's why the slate is the most important key into achieving this organization.
Nagin, thank you. For the next question, Stefan is going to start it. And the question is, how will you expand and protect rent control for low wage earners, particularly seniors on fixed incomes? And just a reminder to folks to stay within your time. You have 1 minute, and I will cut you off when it's your time. Stefan?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. On the issue of seniors, I have worked on the age-friendly Berkeley program, and one of the things that this does, because we know that seniors are going to, people 65 and over, are going to represent 20% of Berkeley's population by the end of this decade. So we need to make sure that we have those support systems for them. One of the proposals under this program is to create a this fund to help subsidize rent, and I want to make sure that happens. In the larger picture, to expand rent control, the biggest obstacle that we face is Costa-Hawkins, and we need to work with our allies all across the state to make sure that that happens. Without that, we are still stuck at rent control for new construction at 1980, which is already 42 years ago. And the more that this keeps happening, the more difficult it's going to be to expand. So those are the two things that I want to make sure get done.
Thank you. Carol?
We absolutely do need to repeal Costa-Hawkins, and as Stefan just said, build alliances with other elected officials around the state. If it was not for rent control, we have so many seniors in our community who would be displaced, and they are still at danger of being displaced as they become increasingly disabled. And that's why I would definitely expand the elevator ordinance, not only as to the enforcement of it, but also that there not be this 10-unit minimum in a building, so that if any building has an elevator, that elevator should be operable. Second of all, on the disability issue, I would work towards property managers or property owners, landlords, having to offer a comparable unit either on that property or on another property that they might own.
Thank you, Carol.
When their tenant becomes too disabled to walk up to the second floor, the third floor, and there is no elevator in that building.
Can you hear me, Carol? Hi, sorry, your time is up. Thank you. Wendy?
Yes, thank you. I don't think it's only people of advanced age. I think that should also include people with disabilities, because it's tied together. So I wouldn't just say just to protect elderly people. I think it's a bigger problem than just the elderly. It includes people with disabilities, because elderly people also have some disabilities. But I agree with Carol about the elevator ordinance, but I also think that, so many people here are talking about overturning Costa-Hawkins, and I don't think we quite have the power to do that, but I would say that there are parts of Costa-Hawkins that are somewhat arbitrary in terms of, buildings that count within rent control and buildings that don't. And I would like to see an evening out of that, because newer buildings, would be better for, sorry.
Solly, would you like me to repeat the question?
I would, thank you.
Okay. All right, so the question is, how will you expand and protect rent control for low wage earners, particularly seniors on fixed incomes?
This is another excellent question, and another question I think that there are many answers to. I'm glad to hear folks supportive of repealing Costa-Hawkins. I guess I'd reiterate that we have rent control that we can expand in Berkeley, and only the slate stood fully in support of that proposal, and as it was proposed by the rent board. In terms of seniors, I think that, like I said, there are a lot of answers. One way, though, that we can expand people's rights actually is just by enforcing them more. I think that there are ways that we can give people more rights, but giving people more rights when we're not even proactively enforcing to the degree I think we need to, their existing rights, to an extent, is really not giving the people the services they need. So one of the things that I'm dedicated to looking into, or not looking into, but exploring, is ways to increase the board's revenue and diversify the board's revenue so that we can do more proactive enforcement, especially as it relates to, and I agree with Wendy, seniors and disabled tenants who are some of the most vulnerable in our community. We really need to make sure that we are able to proactively go out and help them, because so many of them aren't aware of the resources that they have, are not in a place where they can come out to the board. We need to go out to them.
Vanessa?
Thank you. As a mother of a young person with a disability, and someone who was raised by her umbrella, I can pretty much speak to this personally, and also professionally. The bottom line is that we need to be more deliberate about how we are executing regulations. I appreciate my colleagues on this line who are talking about the elevator ordinance. And we also must think about natural disasters, such as if something happens in our community, how are we going to determine where the elderly are and where the disabled are? What are we doing around accessibility and safety? How do we implement that in a way that is cost effective, right? So part of that is we need to hear from our community. We need to hear from our age, we need to hear from our individuals with disabilities, and we need to really create action forums that are going to be deliberate and intentional and make things happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa. Nathan?
Did you call on
Yes.
me? Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Nathan.
Oh, sorry.
Nathan again.
Thank you. Again, it's another excellent question. I have to borrow some of my colleague and Slaven Berkeley's answers here. I really think enforcement is where we have to start when it comes to tenants who have disabilities and elderly tenants. I think we see this. I've seen this certainly in my work as vice chair of the Police Accountability Board, where the reality is we enforce some laws very, very harshly, and other laws not so much. And the ones we don't enforce tend to be the ones that hurt people of lower income, hurt people with disabilities, hurt elders. And the reality is we see that in the city in terms of how we treat our rental units. So my first thing would be to look towards how we can increase enforcement. In what ways are we seeing obstacles? And in what case can we expand tenants and community members being able to come to the board and tell us of issues when they arise? I supported the proposal called Raheem, or to increase our ability to report misconduct claims against police in the city. I would support the same type of proposal for issues in terms of disability and elders when it comes to landlords and lack of repairs. So I think it's very much the similar issues with similar solutions.
Your time is up. Thank you. Nikki?
Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Okay, great. I'm not sure why I can't turn my camera on. I'm running low on battery, but thank you for this question. I, in the physical therapy clinic, treat a lot of disabled and elderly people. This city happens to be the 12th largest aging population in America, and I've heard many of their stories. Many of my patients are being forced out of their units by not knowing their rights, by landing in the hospital and then being forced evicted. This is where the problem starts. Advocacy, not knowing, not education about where they're at. We need to get out there, inform people, educate people, and advocate for them. And that is the best way to keep tenants, number one, in their housing. Second, expand rent control and maintain our rent controlled units. And that is about where I'd start.
Thank you, Nagin. Ida?
I agree with everything my Slate colleagues have laid out. I just came back from Croatia visiting my aging mother, and this issue is really on my mind right now. The house she lives in is not up to code, American Standards Code. There's a door that's locked, and she couldn't get the ambulance to see her, almost died from blood pressure issues. So I have to find a way to put her in a home. So yes, this is very close to me right now. And also had a friend who was forced out by a landlord who was harassing her for years till she finally left, and she had to leave the state because she couldn't find adequate rent here in Berkeley. So yes, I would repeat everything that my Slate colleagues have said and just adding my own personal experience with this. Thank you.
For the next question, Carol, you will be starting us off. Money in politics is an important issue for the League of Women Voters. Can you please speak to how you are financing your campaign and if you feel that this will impact the decisions you make if elected? Carol, you're starting us off.
As far as my campaign being financed, it's generally from other community members. I am endorsed by 2 council members, but other than that, it's really widespread throughout the community. This is my 2nd time running, and I had supporters and have supporters again in every district of the city. And generally, they're just regular people. They're not office holders. But they are people who know of my work and they know of my commitment to the issues that I'm focusing on, that I'm prioritizing, which are anti-displacement, disability issues, and anti-discrimination issues. As to how that impacts people that know me know that I am independent, and that doesn't mean, as was stated earlier by one of the Slate people, that means that I'm not against displacement. I've been working to prevent tenants from being displaced for decades.
Thank you. Your time is up.
Okay.
Wendy?
Yes, I'm running as an independent, and my any campaign contributions are just coming from Berkeley citizens. So I am endorsed by Susan Wengraf, Terry Taplin, and Lori Drosty, but all the donations are from just Berkeley residents. I don't even think I have solicited anyone outside of Berkeley.
Thank you. Solly?
Could you repeat the question again?
Yes. The question is, money in politics is an important issue for the League of Women Voters. Can you please speak to how you are financing your campaign and if you feel this will impact the decisions you make if elected?
Absolutely. I am thrilled that we're the first set of renters candidates who are able to benefit from public financing in Berkeley. All 5 members of the slate are participating in public financing. And yes, I do think that the money that I'm taking influences my decisions. I'm only taking money from Berkeley voters. I'm sure I'll get some eventually donations from non-Berkeley residents, but I'm only taking money because of public financing, especially from people, not from PACs or anything like that. Even before public financing, when I ran in 2018, was a corporate free candidate. But I also think that it's really important that some of the fundraising we've done has been people who I don't know, who saw a message go out from the Berkeley Tenants Union saying we had pro-tenant candidates, people who were going to defend renters' rights, and we need your help to make sure they get on the ballot. And so people who I've never met before, who the whole slate have never met before, came up and gave us donations. And I think that's part of the power of the convention and part of the power of this coalition is that we are a group of people who don't all know each other personally, but are united around common goals and common needs.
Thank you, Solly. Vanessa?
Thank you. I was just going to mention that no Power PAC money here. So, I am eligible. I've qualified for public financing. The most of the percentage of the contributions that have been given to me have been Berkeley voters. And of the few that have not been Berkeley voters, they are mission aligned, they are progressive, they themselves live as tenants and/or work for the University of California at Berkeley or other nonprofit organizations. I'm very proud that I am not accepting any big dollars from any real estate companies or other entities, police commissions that are not in alignment with our purpose. Thank you.
Thank you. Nathan?
Sorry, turn my camera off. Yes, as to what my state member said, we're all doing public financing. I'm pretty sure 99% of my donations are from Berkeley residents and just regular folks who either I've met at some point working on the commission, a committee, at the state council meeting, or as Sully said, folks that just agree with the cause and the importance of the work and were generous enough to donate us some funds under, the $60 limit that public financing requires. So that's where all my funds have come from. There's not going to be any PAC money. I can promise all voters there's probably not a police union in the state that's going to donate to my campaign. So I'm very much people driven, people funded, and that's how I plan to carry on my policies.
Thank you. Nikki?
So I'm grateful that I'm a part of a community due to the physical therapy practice that I'm in touch with thousands of Berkeleyans on a yearly basis. I see hundreds of new patients every few months and the returning patients. And all I really had to do was say, hey, I'm running for this office, and people know me. People know what I stand for. They know what my values are, and they want me to represent tenants. Many of my patients are tenants that I've helped to maintain them in their housing. So basically it was very simple, small donations from the community, and thank God for Berkeley Tenants Union, bringing in more people. And of course, we are all publicly funded here in the city of Berkeley. Thank you.
Thank you, Nagin. Ida?
But same as my slate colleagues, we all receive public financing. So our donations are limited to $60. And they're all from friends, family, neighbors, citizens of Berkeley I never met before. And I would just like to add one of these events where the Berkeley Tenant Union and DSA called for people to come and donate to us. Many of the the forms that people filled out, it said retiree, and there was a $10 donation. And to me, that $10 donation means more than if somebody gave me millions. And I am inspired to fight for them. They're just regular people struggling to live in this city, and that's who I will represent.
Thank you. Stefan?
All right, there we go. Well, I'm proud to have been endorsed by a diverse group of elected officials, tenants, small landlords, and community members that believe in Berkeley values of making our community a more inclusive and welcoming place. And as a result, I've gotten donations, most stuff from Berkeley from, a wide range of people. I got teachers, nurses, tenants, small landlords. They're all supporting my campaign, and I'm greatly appreciative of that. I was a big supporter of Measure X1, the public financing measure, and I'm glad that it has been expanded this year. Unfortunately, it was capped for the rent board at $8,000, and the reason is because they looked at previous winning campaigns, and it was $8,000, but they failed to consider that that usually is from a slate, so that's $40,000. You cannot run a citywide campaign on $8,000, which is why, unfortunately, I didn't do public financing, but I do hope that it is set at a more reasonable level, and we'll be more than happy to advocate for that.
Thank you, Stefan. For our next question, Wendy is going to start us off. And I just wanted to comment on the fact that I know we started very late. Thank you all so much in the audience for your patience. We are going to continue an extra 30 minutes. So I know we had scheduled to end at 8, but we'll be ending at 8:30 as long as that's okay with the candidates. And so I just wanted to give you all a heads up, but just as a reminder, everything will be recorded. So if you aren't able to stay until the end, you'll be able to watch the recording. So the next question is, it is unrealistic to expect Berkeley residents who applied for rental assistance to pay tens of thousands of dollars in back rent once the city lifts the eviction moratorium. How are you looking at this problem, and what solution would you propose? And again, starting us off will be Wendy. And you're on mute, just so you know.
Thank you. Yes, we do have a problem, and if I were elected on to the rent board, I think that the rent board has to take a really active role in guiding tenants and small landlords through this, because we're in very uncharted waters in a lot of ways. And I think that we have to show that we are trying to do the best for everybody. And I think that the rent board should reflect that we're trying to do the best for everybody involved, because we're, you know, it is a difficult situation. It's difficult for tenants, it's difficult for small landlords. And, you know, I think we have to get everyone at the table to get and work on solutions, as opposed to being, you know, kind of divisive. And I really don't want to see tenants and landlords divided.
Thanks, Wendy. Solly?
There we go. Yeah, it's a great question. It's a great question, and it's a question, I mean, I really, unfortunately, I don't know if I know the answer to. Like, there is a crisis that we are facing in terms of the expiration, and we talked about it a little bit before, of the eviction moratorium. And luckily, there was a lot of state and federal dollars that were made available to assist tenants, which we have to recognize. Those dollars went right into the pockets of their landlords. And so we need to explore and find more resources that we can in Berkeley. There is. Sorry about
Hello?
that. My aunt just called me. And I think that trying to find, in making sure people education about their rights is another big one, right? We've expanded, you know, protections for people who have that rent debt, but if they don't know what those protections are, then we can't protect them. And so making sure that outreach is happening, that we're identifying new resources to provide those dollars. I don't know if it'll be enough, but we need to try.
Thank you. Vanessa?
Thank you. I think we need to definitely have a community development asset outreach plan that is going to reach many populations, especially those people that are vulnerable, in a way that is linguistically accessible. Immigrant populations who speak different languages across the diaspora of being a Latina or Latina or Latine is going to be really important. The other is to think about, again, using an action forum place. You know, we are Berkeley, right? And so we can create action solutions. And how do we do that in a way that can help fund and help these individuals, you know, pay for their excess rents, as well as provide opportunities for landlords to have, especially small landlords who are not getting a profit, to have some relief. So that will require innovation and action forum that, again, is intentional to meeting the needs of vulnerable populations. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa. Next is Nathan.
Yes, you know, I would say the solutions at the board level start with our advocacy. I think all of us who are honest about the size of this problem know it must go beyond what the board itself can do. But what I would say is, you know, we must be committed, again, much as the earlier question about what do we do with the eviction cliff. This is a fundamental part of the eviction cliff and the problems that have been created by this pandemic. And in the long run, problems that have been created by, you know, a housing market that has, you know, served the priorities of some more than the priorities of others, more than the priorities of housing itself. So I believe it starts with advocacy. I believe it begins with ensuring accessibility as resources come available. But ultimately, as a board, we must be willing to push, as candidates must be willing to push to really tell folks that, yes, I understand the president has told you the pandemic is over, but the effects and the pandemic are not over. And our policies must reflect that, and we must support tenants in a meaningful way.
Thank you. Nagin?
Thank you. This is something that I've thought about a lot because this occurred, as I said, to myself when I was in the commercial unit. There is no way to pay present rent and past rent at the same time and without any control from the government. We need a citywide ban on this, maintaining those who have registered to get this funds from the state must be protected until the state can give them the assistance that they had offered. That will ensure that people who have tried to take action and tried to mitigate the consequences of this cliff are protected and kept in their place. Then we need to educate and make sure everyone in the city knows that this is a potential for them. And finally, we need to get the state to realize that we need more funds to manage this so that people, their past due rents are paid by the state full, and everything is freshly laid because believe me, so many businesses went under because of this. And I have felt the heat myself. Thank you.
Ida?
Well, to piggyback of what Nagin was just saying, the state does have a large budget surplus that could be used to solve this problem to a large extent. You know, we do, as Soli was saying, we do need to educate more. A lot of people are not aware of their rights and resources available to them. We need to, as Vanessa was talking, we need new creative solutions. I'm thinking there would be an opportunity for the rent board to partner with Ballot School of Law, perhaps, to have law students interning and or a clinic, a housing clinic that could find some innovative legal solutions to this problem. There are lots of opportunities in Berkeley. There are lots of smart people here, and where there is a will, there's a way. Thank you.
Thank you. Stefan?
Yeah, well, you know, over the years, I've worked on budget proposals to help address anti-displacement and rental subsidies, which has been especially important during the pandemic. And, you know, but, you know, as we know, during the first few months of the pandemic, when unemployment skyrocketed, especially in industries where that are more low income, where people, you know, live paycheck to paycheck, it's almost impossible to get back from that. And that's why we need to, you know, continue those investments. And we as a city cannot do it alone. We are going to need state support. You know, it's unfortunate that instead of the state providing subsidies, rental subsidies to people, we ended up providing rental subsidy or gas subsidies. You know, hopefully we can do better next time. We also need to make sure that small landlords are able, who are part of this community and whose source of income is that, are able to pay their mortgages, because if they're not able to, that's going to end up in a foreclosure, and what's going to happen to the tenants. So it's difficult, but we need state action as well as local action.
Thank you, Stefan. Carol?
We can't afford any more displacement in the community. We can't afford to lose any more diversity, racial diversity, socioeconomic diversity. Anti-displacement has to be our top priority during this period of time. We can advocate with the state, but we can't rely on the state. We can advocate as to the back monies owed, but we can't rely on them to continue to cover it. And we just have to make this a top priority in the city. Council is going to have to put aside some other things that they want to do and make sure that nobody is displaced in this community. The council is going to have to prioritize that these back monies be paid to the landlords that need the money, because some small landlords can't afford to take that sort of loss, whereas the larger buildings can, the big investors, the big developers can. Those are the people that need to be linked up with legal resources, but we need to also protect the small landlords. Thank you.
Thank you. For our next question, Solly is going to start us off. We have 2 questions left, so you can keep track. Developers are coming into Berkeley promising below market rate rents for people with disabilities and people who make below $80,000 per year. Are the developers living up to their promise? If not, how will you ensure that they will keep their promises?
Well, that's a good question. It's hard to give a definitive answer because different people and different organizations are doing different things. But there are definitely a lot of situations of broken promises and of misrepresentation. And I'm not going to, there are definitely better actors and bad actors, but at the end of the day, folks are profit motivated. And so we have to make sure that we're holding people accountable. And it's not a matter of being pro or anti-development. It's a matter of being realistic about people's motivations. And so, in particular, there's been a really concerning trend of, for example, library gardens, where, this building was acquired potentially with city funds, and it's very unaccountable and it's theoretically affordable, but there's all sorts of problems. I think that we have to make sure that people are who are benefiting from city subsidy and who are benefiting from city, zoning waivers in exchange for for affordability are being held accountable. I think that comes down to enforcement. And just like Nathan said, there are a lot of laws that we enforce really strongly, especially when it's petty property crimes. There was a lot of laws we don't, especially when they benefit poor people.
Thank you. Vanessa?
Thank you. I think in a city like Berkeley, that is a national model. We have to create more infrastructure in our policies to be able to promote opportunity housing. I said this earlier. It is unfathomable to me that developers will make $80,000 the benchmark when the elderly are not even making $20,000. So I mean, I don't understand how that is going to necessarily help with affordability. And so in this case, my thinking is that we need to get to again a more economic integrated model around how we adjust these policies in a way that will be able to support our aging in place and our individuals with disabilities and our Black and Brown communities and et cetera, who are being pushed out of Berkeley. And we need to, we need to do more, and we need to do more in a very mindful, thoughtful way. We are a city that has, Nobel Prize winners, and yet we're not solving this problem. And that will take will and skill. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa. Nathan?
I'm sorry, did you say me?
Sorry, Nathan?
Oh, okay.
Yes, yes, it really echoing everything my slate members have said. Invariably, it depends project. I don't want to paint with a broad brush every development that happens in our city, but we certainly see broken promises. I think it has to start again. I know I sound like a broken record, but it does really start with enforcement. We have laws on the books for a lot of this. We have agreements that get written and made, but certain folks can violate agreements and get away with it. Certain folks can't even sign the agreement to begin with. And I think that is really the difference we see when it comes to the treatment. And when it comes to housing, we're talking about, again, a fundamental human right, and one that is treated more as a market tool for some folks, and other folks just something they can build and say they built it. And again, we understand there are developers who care about these issues as well, but it has to begin with us enforcing the law. It has to begin with us being clear in terms of these agreements, what inclusionary requirements are in them, and ensuring that we're being honest when these things are built, who will actually go to live there.
Thank you, Nathan. Negin?
Thank you. This is a great question. Why is my face not on here?
Oh, did you switch the camera? There you go.
Okay, sorry. I've thought about this again for many a nights. And the problem is when there's financialization of the housing markets and such a profit motive that housing has become assets, and it just flip of the asset can make billions of dollars for a very small group of people, we are in trouble. And what is area median income? Right now, what I make as a business owner and a professional with a graduate degree does not even make median income. So that just telling you something. Very low and very low income is what we need to focus on. And a housing that's required to build that needs subsidy from the city, the state, and the government. And we need to enforce that the people who build that housing make it for those people and nothing else. And enforcement is the answer.
Thank you. Ida?
Yes, I could. What's going on? I could echo.
Anyone who's not speaking.
As a result of touching that thing up there to shut it.
Okay, try again.
Okay. Oh, right. This is better. I would also like to echo what my slate members have said, and I would like to add, this commodification of housing, which really is a human right, is really the cause of the suffering. We need more affordable housing. We need to redefine what affordable means. We need to increase the percentage of affordable units in these new developments. And ultimately, we need a lot more socialized housing, such as, back in the day, there were a lot of federal housing projects. I don't know what's going on with them now, but I don't see any being built. I used to live in one in New York City when I first came to this country. And while it was not luxury living, it was, it afforded me a normal life without extreme stress over whether I'm going to be able to pay rent or not. So these are some of the solutions. Thank you.
Stefan?
Yeah, well, under the state's rental housing needs allocation, the city of Berkeley is required to build around 9,000 units of housing by the end of this decade, a majority of which is slated at below market rate. And in order to help encourage this kind of developments, there's really a carrot and stick approach. With the carrot, you have state laws that allow density bonuses. If you build affordable housing, you can build more and maximize that affordable housing. We also have sticks on the local level. We have fees that if you don't build affordable housing, you have to pay a fee. And I have helped work to maximize that. That goes towards the creation of affordable housing. And as other people have mentioned, we need to make sure that the laws that we do have in place are being enforced, to make sure that people are being held accountable and that we can maximize the amount of affordable housing in our community, because that's what we need.
Thank you. Carol?
Again, this goes back to the Nexus study that I recommended through the Homeless Commission about 4 years ago that should be done by the city to analyze the current inclusionary housing that's being done. Currently, too many developers are electing to pay into the affordable housing mitigation fee, the housing trust fund, rather than having units on site. We need more units on site. They are finding that it is cheaper for them to put the money into the affordable pay the affordable housing mitigation fee. And with the housing costs, construction costs being as high as they are, that does not benefit the tenants as much as having units on site. So we need to really return to that, the structure that we have in Berkeley, and analyze that. Also, we need to make sure that extremely low income persons are included. This is not just homeless persons or seniors. This is also the working poor, people that work in retail, people that work in restaurants, and they all are part of the community also. Thank you.
Wendy?
Yes, thank you. This is, for better or for worse, developers come in with the idea of making profits. And on the one hand, we don't want to stop building. We do need more building, but I do think this comes down to enforcement of the laws that we have and being more rigorous about that. I think pretty much everyone has said this, that there has to be a consistency in enforcement. And then on the other side of it is, how can we make developers, I'd much rather them build the affordable housing than pay into the fund. So, how can we present ideas to the city council to make more affordable housing more attractive to developers?
Thank you, Wendy. This next question will be our last question, and we'll start with Vanessa. The last question will be, explain your position on accessory dwelling units, or ADUs as we've been calling them, and duplexes, include golden duplexes. Should they all be under rent control? Why or why not? Also, how do we ensure duplexes currently under rent control stay under rent control?
Thank you. Yes, they should all be under rent control. We advocated about golden duplexes a few months ago. We need to make sure that we have equity across all dwellings and make sure that rental protections can exist no matter what type of facility you live in. So the answer is yes. I think, how are we going to implement this? I'm hearing a lot about enforcement. It's good. Enforcement is good. However, we need a how approach, because it's been a little too long, right, that these dwellings have literally circumvented rent control. I mean, it's just unfathomable to me. And to think about the amounts of dwellings that exist in the city of Berkeley, where we can have that opportunity to have individuals who are immigrants, who are working in those kitchens, be able to live in those homes in a way that will promote sustainability. So I hope that answers your questions. And I think that's a really important question. Thank you for asking that.
Yes, thank you. Nathan?
Yes, echoing what Vanessa said, yeah, I believe all ADUs, golden duplex, all should be under rent control. I think, at times there's a false assumption that, if there's not the rent control ordinance, that somehow the units are going to be protected by some other type of magical rent control. It doesn't exist. Like the need for rent control of the units is as much as any other unit, because fundamentally there's going to be a tenant there. The landlord or the owner of the property is not going to lose the right to their property, or the right to sell eventually, or the right to even do a lot of things. But the tenant is in a lot more precarious of a position if they don't have this rent control in place. So all of these units should have rent control. And I think, again, it does begin with enforcement. This says also depends how we implement these different techniques. But I would say all these units should be under rent control. And we've advocated for that position quite clearly as a slate.
Thank you. Nagin?
Thank you. Oh, sorry. One of the issues that exists here is that when a person decides to use their house or their structure, ADU or what have you, as a means of generating revenue, they have now lost control of it as their own home. It becomes somebody else's home. And once you realize that this is a business, it's somebody else's home, every business must be regulated in America. My business is regulated. I can't just do whatever I want in the physical therapy office. When you decide to rent your area out, the government, state or city needs to control something about how you're generating money. When another person's home is at your whim, that you just kick them out at any time you want, there's a problem. There's no management of that at a higher level. And that's the problem here. Yes, all ADUs should have the same protections as any other apartment unit, but looking at it, these different perspectives is giving people the reason to say, well, this shouldn't be included. Why not? It's somebody's shelter. Thank you.
Sorry, Wendy, can you please mute? And Ida, you are up next.
I don't think I have anything new to say to what my slate mates have said. We, as a slate, support rent control across the board, and that includes ADUs and golden duplexes. There's no reason why these units should not be under rent control. And, tenants are more vulnerable by all means. Thank you.
Thank you. Stefan, I'm going to repeat the question again since it was a long one. Explain your position on accessory dwelling units, ADUs, and duplexes. Include golden duplexes. Should they all be under rent control? Why or why not? Also, how do we ensure duplexes currently under rent control stay under rent control?
Yeah, this is a difficult question because obviously we need to maximize tenant protections, but we also have to balance that out to rely on this revenue to live their lives and live in our community. So, I want to make sure that we have a fair approach, because if we get to the point where it becomes burdensome and we need to be building ADUs, but if people say, oh, it's too restrictive, I'm not going to build that, that's just going to make the housing crisis even worse. You cannot be pro-tenant if you support policies that make it more restrictive to encourage this kind of development. On the issue of golden duplexes, I also think we need to have a fair and balanced approach. We do need to ultimately encompass that, but when small property owners bought that property, it was under the promise that they have certain rights, and if we remove the rug from them, that's bad. But I do support transitioning into rent control once it goes on sale and is no longer in the family.
Thanks, Stefan. Carol?
I support everything that can prevent someone from being displaced. And I support expansion of rent control. There's a difficult issue here, though, where you have to make a distinction with a golden duplex owner or an AD owner that owns a single unit. They are very different from an investor, from somebody who owns multiple units and multiple properties. And the issue is not is really in the just cause, because when people are very close to each other, and this is what one landlord said during a public comment, it's like a marriage. Imagine being forced into a marriage. And that rang very true to me, being forced to stay in a marriage. So what I recommend is a compromise position, which is 30 days is not enough to displace somebody. There should be a 6-month notice of displacement with an incentive of relocation expenses at 3 months.
Carol.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wendy?
Yes, sorry. For properties where the owner and the tenant share common space, for instance, golden duplexes, in-law units, ADUs, that living situation is a relationship between tenant and owner that is a little bit more like a roommate situation. And I actually love Carol's analogy as to being in a marriage. And for those kinds of living scenarios, I think that the owner should have an opportunity to be able to end that relationship if things are not going well, or they need, let's say they need the space for their mother or mother-in-law, or, for whatever they originally intended the space. But I do think that we can craft kinds of exemptions and things, whether that's giving tenants more notice. I think we can work on that, but ultimately, I think if we remove people's sovereignty over their own home, will a lot of affordable housing.
Thank you. Solly?
Yeah, there's been an unfortunate amount of euphemism when we have this conversation. I mean, let's not, withdraw from the relationship. We're talking about eviction. We're talking about displacement, right? I don't support giving people more advanced notice of displacement. I support preventing displacement. And I think it's also really unfortunate that folks have bought into the kind of developer rhetoric, and frankly, a lot of fear mongering from landlord organizations, from realtor organizations who promote an apocalyptic vision of what these regulations are in order to push back against them, in order to make people afraid, right? We are standing for the simple proposition that you should not have your rent tripled on you overnight. We're standing for the simple proposition that you should not be evicted from your home for no reason. These are the basic protections. I think people don't understand. Without rent control, your rent can triple. Without eviction protections, you can be evicted for no reason or any reason at all. Every tenant in the city of Berkeley deserves these things because they are human rights.
Beautiful. Thank you, Solly. Before the candidates give their closing statements, I have a few remarks on behalf of the LWV BAE. First of all, thank you so much to the candidates for running for office and for your participation this evening. I know we had a lot of technical difficulties, and I really appreciate you hanging in there. I also want to thank the audience for engaging in our democracy. For further information about upcoming forums, the candidates, pros and cons, and positions on ballot measures, please visit our league's website, lwvbae.org or votersedge.org/CA. We invite you to join the League to help us engage voters and defend democracy. We do so much more than voter registration and education. We work on issues like climate change, criminal justice reform, healthcare, and much more. Visit our website and social media accounts at LWVBAE. The deadline to register to vote is October 24th this year. You can register to vote online at the Secretary of State's website, sos.ca.gov. Vote by mail ballots will be sent to all registered voters from October 10th. Remember to return your vote by mail ballots by Tuesday, November 8th, or vote in person at any of the vote centers in Alameda County. We are encouraging voters to vote as early as possible. For more information about voting in this election, please visit our website, lwvbae.org/elections or votersedge.org/CA, or the Alameda County Registrar of Voters website, acvote.gov. Now the candidates will make closing statements. We will reverse the order that they began with. And again, each candidate will give a closing statement of 1 minute. We will start with Vanessa.
Thank you. Thank you, League of Women Voters, for having us. The slate is really proud to be here. And as a woman of color, I want to just let everyone know who's on the line that it's going to be my greatest accomplishment when we win to be on the rent board that we have rent controls that protects inclusionary models. Bottom line, I want to focus on safety and access, as I mentioned, opportunity housing, as I mentioned, related to economically integrated neighborhoods, and also community voice. As my colleagues have also mentioned, we need to hear from the community. We also need to have an asset development model that is going to reach all the communities in Berkeley in a way that we can hear from them and move forward our inclusionary model. So thank you for having me, and looking forward to serving you all in January. Thank you.
Thank you. Solly?
Yeah, thank you so much. First of all, thank you everyone for accommodating our technical difficulties and our washed out cameras as we've been transitioning from event to event and doing things on the fly. I really believe that the tenant convention and the values it holds really model the democratic spirit of the League of Women Voters. That the tenant convention is an institution that is a grassroots, small d democratic, participatory, and comes from, of, and by the community. And the values it's put forward, like we've talked about, are ones that center the people in our community who have been suffering incredible amounts during this pandemic. Tenants in our community, senior tenants, disabled tenants, tenants of color, immigrant tenants, these folks who need our support now more than ever. They came together, we all came together, our community came together to put forward this slate of myself, Vanessa Marrero, Nathan Mizell, Negin Mosaed, Ida Martinac. We really believe that housing is a human right and that we need to do everything we can to preserve and protect those rights. So learn more at berkeleyrentboard.org.
Thank you, Solly. Wendy?
I'm gonna turn off my audio.
Yes, thank you. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum. It's been great. I think actually all of us could go on a bit longer because when we start talking about these issues, I think we all feel really passionate about these housing issues, even though we may not always agree. I would also mention that one of the things that we hadn't talked about is, the added pressure with UC Berkeley's added students. And that is also, that's holding everything from UC Berkeley accountable to also the legislature that is pushing that on them. So I would thank you for all, taking that into consideration too, because I think that the rent board does have a role to play in terms of advocating for housing and with all the pressures of housing that we're under right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Carol?
Berkeley is being decimated by all this large development that's swallowing up our community, the astronomical rents, the egregiously high home prices, and small homeowners homeowners are also being impacted by this as well as renters. They're deer in the headlights seeing this happening. And so we really need to protect the character of our community. I am very much pro rent control. So many seniors, many of whom I know would not be able to stay in Berkeley were they not under rent control, which is Prop 13 for renters. And very strong anti-displacement, very strong on these disability issues, which can also impact on younger persons if they were in an accident, for example, and very strong on discrimination issues. I have been involved in preventing people from displacement since 1978 when I worked at Legal Services, keeping tenants in their homes.
Thank you, Carol. Your time's up. Stefan? Stefan, can you hear me?
Well, thanks everyone for this great conversation. Yes. Oops, can you hear me? Yes. Okay, great. Well, thanks again for this great conversation. I moved to this wonderful city over a decade ago and have spent my time giving back to this community. Over the past decade, I have dived into tenant and housing policies. And with my experience, I'm ready to ready to start the job on day one. The leaders that you trust me to get the job done. And that is due to my thoughtful and principled approach to addressing the issues we face. I think that's why I am the only candidate to have received the endorsements from a majority of the City Council. I have also received the endorsements of the Alameda County Democratic Party, which I'm very proud of. If I'm elected, I will bring experienced and principled leadership, which is really critical during this time. I hope that you will join a diverse group of elected officials, tenants, small landlords, and community members in supporting me. For more information, visit my website, stefan.vote. Thank you, and have a good evening.
Thank you. Ida?
I would also like to thank you, the League of Women Voters, for hosting this event and for everything you do. And I would like to stress the importance of the slate as a community nominated group to represent them at the Red Board. Many organizations participated in the Berkeley Tenant Convention, and they have all endorsed us and support us. I'm a lifelong civil servant and a union activist, and I bring that experience to the forum. And I would like to thank you very much again.
Thank you. Nagin?
Thank you for having us here tonight. And I just want to say, in the age of financialization of the housing markets, where the biggest commodity in the history of mankind is housing, no commodity has ever been like this before. When there's $260 trillion worth of assets tied up in housing, it is impossible to fight this without unity, without cohesion. Of course, a bunch of electeds are not going to enforce what brought them there in the first place. The people on the ground are. That's who we represent at the convention, and who have elected us, and who we're responsible to, and who we vowed to protect. And I hope that you all do not underestimate that. Community power deserves attention and support to maintain itself. And that's what the Rent Board is. And we need to continue to elect people to the Rent Board that represent and are vetted by and for the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nagin. And finally, Nathan?
Keep turning off the camera. I'm sorry. But again, I want to thank the League of Women Voters. Thank you and Candia, who's reached out to me in the past and in terms of police review commission work. But I'd really just say, we as a slate are committed to all we can do for renter protections, all we can do to ensure and increase affordable housing in our city. And, I'd say, I'm a first to know I moved to Berkeley about almost 5 years ago now. And ever since I really started speaking to Black residents here, often they speak of a city that in some ways no longer exists. A population that used to be close to 25% Black is now under 8%. And we see this here. Frankly, we see this back home in San Diego, for me in Southeast San Diego, where my Nana lives, a whole different neighborhood, because housing isn't affordable. And for me, these issues, informed by the empirical data, informed by the community members, informed by a true passion for change that I've displayed other ways, I want to make housing more affordable. I want to protect renters. And we as the slate are committed to those values.
Thank you. Please join me in a round of applause for the candidates. Thank you all for staying late. I know you can't hear them, but they're clapping for you. Thank you all so much and have a good night. Take care. Be well.
Thank you.